On my 28th birthday, my grandfather William changed my life forever. I remember sitting in his study that evening, surrounded by leather-bound books and the familiar scent of his pipe tobacco. The warm glow of his antique desk lamp cast shadows across his face as he handed me what looked like a formal document. "Marie," he said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses with a slight smile. "I've been watching you work on your designs since you were little. Drawing in notebooks, creating beautiful things from nothing. Now it's time to make that dream of yours real." My hands trembled as I read the investment contract. The amount was substantial, enough to transform my small online stationery business into something truly significant. I'd been running my shop from my tiny apartment, designing custom planners and office supplies whenever I could find time between design school classes. "I've reviewed your business plan thoroughly," Grandpa William continued, leaning back in his leather chair. "Your vision for custom corporate stationery, branded office supplies, personalized planners. It's more than just a dream. It's a viable business model, especially with small companies looking for affordable customized products." The pandemic in 2020 had actually helped my little venture grow. While stuck at home, I'd poured my creative energy into designing planners and organizational tools. What started as a hobby on Etsy had slowly evolved into a passionate side project with real potential. I just needed capital to scale it up. "Your talent isn't just in the designs, Marie," he said, his eyes twinkling with that familiar warmth I'd known since childhood. "It's in understanding what people need, making the ordinary beautiful and functional. That's a rare gift." Tears welled up in my eyes as I clutched the contract. "Grandpa, this is more than I ever expected. I don't know how to thank you." He reached across his massive oak desk and patted my hand, just like he used to do when I was a little girl showing him my latest drawings. "Just promise me two things," he said, his voice turning serious. "Use it wisely, and don't let anyone derail your dreams." Not anyone. Looking back now, I realize he was trying to warn me. He'd seen the pattern in our family long before I fully understood it. If only I'd known then just how prophetic those words would become. Later that day, everything started unraveling almost immediately. My brother James, at 35, was a former financial broker who'd lost his license over what he called questionable trades. The whispers in the industry painted a darker picture. Client funds mismanaged, regulations violated, trust betrayed. He hadn't held a steady job in nearly 2 years. Not that he was really trying. The gambling had consumed him. First sports betting, then poker, then anything he could place money on. Each loss drove him deeper into debt, deeper into desperation. Our parents, Diana and Robert Thompson, enabled every destructive choice. Mom would write checks to cover his debts, while Dad made excuses for his behavior. Their sprawling suburban house had become James' consequence-free sanctuary. "He's just going through a rough patch," Mom would say, nervously adjusting her designer watch. Probably another gift to herself after covering one of James's emergencies. Dad, ever the pragmatist in his tailored suits and carefully curated authority, would nod along. "The financial sector is volatile right now. Many talented brokers are struggling. But this wasn't a temporary setback. I'd watched this pattern play out since we were teenagers. James, the golden child with his elite business school degree, could do no wrong, even as he did everything wrong. Every mistake was excused, every failure cushioned, every bad decision wrapped in layers of justification. The news of Grandpa's investment spread through the family like wildfire. Mom cornered me in their gourmet kitchen that evening, her voice dripping with practiced concern. "Marie, sweetheart," she began, wringing her manicured hands. "You know James has been having such a difficult time lately. He's behind on some very important payments, and with his extensive financial experience. My stomach clenched. I knew where this was heading. Mom, this investment is for my business. My legitimate, growing business. Family helps family, Dad's voice boomed from the doorway. He stepped into the kitchen, his presence filling the space like it always did. James needs this opportunity more than you do right now. The guilt trips began in earnest. Every conversation became a weapon. They talked about James' potential, his stress, his needs. How I had always been the responsible one, the strong one. How I could afford to help, since I still had my little online shop. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each conversation chipping away at my resolve. The next morning. The worst blow came the next day. I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee when my parents appeared in my doorway, their expressions carefully composed. Now that you're entering the business world properly, Dad began, his voice carrying that familiar authoritative tone he used in board meetings. It's time to discuss your contribution to household expenses. Mom nodded along, adding, $2,000 monthly rent seems reasonable, don't you think? The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Rent? After you just pressured me to give most of Grandpa's investment to James? You're a businesswoman now, Dad counted. It's time to start acting like one. I stared at them, reality crashing down around me. Here I was, still in design school, barely making ends meet with my online shop, having just surrendered most of my startup capital to James, and now they wanted rent? That's when everything crystallized with brutal clarity. I wasn't their daughter. I was their contingency plan. A reliable backup for when James' schemes inevitably failed. They'd never once asked to see my design portfolio. Never shown interest in my business plans. Never even visited my Etsy shop. That evening, I spent the next few days in a daze, watching them with new eyes. Every interaction felt hollow, scripted. The pressure for rent continued, paired with subtle reminders about James' needs. By the end of the week, I'd packed my bags. Standing in their perfectly decorated living room, surrounded by family photos that suddenly felt like props in a play, I made my announcement. I'm leaving, I said, gripping my suitcase handle until my knuckles turned white. I won't be your backup plan anymore. Mom's tears started immediately, right on cue. How can you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you? Dad's face darkened with anger. If you walk out that door, don't expect us to be here when you fail. That's the thing, Dad, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. You were never there when I succeeded either. I walked out into the cool evening air, my entire life packed into 2 suitcases and a laptop bag. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. That night, I blocked their numbers, emails, and social media accounts. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but also the first step toward saving myself. 5 years later, the years after leaving were a blur of constant work and determination. I balanced design school classes with freelance jobs, rebuilding my business penny by penny. My small Etsy shop evolved into a proper e-commerce site, each sale a small victory. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, using my kitchen table as both dining room and design studio. Every spare dollar went back into the business. Better design software, marketing materials, inventory. At night, I'd work until my eyes burned, creating custom planners and branded office supplies for my growing client base. By the second year, I had enough saved to lease a small storefront in a modest shopping center. The day I hung the Thompson Designs sign in the window, I stood there for an hour just staring at it, hardly believing it was real. The business grew steadily. 1 location became 2. Our online presence exploded as small businesses discovered our custom corporate gift sets and branded office supplies. I hired my first employee, then my second. Each milestone felt like vindication. Unexpected message. Then, after 5 years of silence, my parents reached out. Seeing their names on my phone screen made my coffee go cold. The messages started vague, probing. How was I doing? They'd heard about my success. They were proud. But something felt off about their sudden interest. Finally, Mom cracked. James is in trouble, Marie. Serious trouble. The story emerged in fragments, each more disturbing than the last. James hadn't just failed at another business venture. He'd crossed legal lines. They danced around the specifics, but their desperation was clear. We can pay you back double what you gave him, Dad offered, his voice carrying that familiar manipulative tone. We just need your business connections to help straighten things out. Reading between the lines painted an ugly picture. Gambling debts, failed schemes, and now something illegal. They wanted me to leverage my hard-earned business network, the relationships I'd built through years of honest work, to bail James out of whatever hole he dug himself into. Think of what it would mean for the family, Mom pleaded. You're in a position to help now. All I could think was, nothing has changed. 5 years of silence, no congratulations on my success, no interest in my life, until they needed something. At the restaurant, they chose an upscale steakhouse for our reunion dinner. The forced cheerfulness in their greeting set off immediate warning bells. Mom wore her special occasion pearls, Dad his important meeting tie. The awkward small talk lasted through appetizers. Questions about my business asked without real interest. Comments about the weather, safe topics that avoided 5 years of silence. Halfway through our entrees, they revealed their agenda. Your business network, Mom began delicately, cutting her salmon into precise squares, especially your connections with investors and financial institutions. They could be invaluable for James right now. I was formulating a response when the restaurant door opened. James sauntered in, 5 years older, but unchanged in every way that mattered. The same smug smile, the same entitled air as he dropped into the empty chair beside me. Little sister, he grinned, helping himself to my wine. Heard you're quite the success story now. Funny how things work out, right? He leaned back, loosening his tie, probably borrowed for the occasion. You know, if you think about it, you should thank me. If I hadn't borrowed that money back then, you might never have worked so hard. I practically forced you to succeed. The restaurant's ambient noise faded to a dull roar in my ears. 5 years of silence. And this was his opening line? This was their plan. Ambush me at dinner and let James try to manipulate me again? I'm done, I announced, standing up so abruptly my water glass wobbled. Don't contact me again. Any of you. Marie, please, Mom's voice cracked. We're family. I turned back at that, anger finally breaking through. Family? No, I'm your backup plan. Your safety net. Your solution to James' problems. That's not family. That's exploitation. You're being dramatic, James scoffed, reaching for my abandoned steak. It's just business. Exactly, I replied, dropping money on the table for my meal. And I'm not investing in toxic assets anymore. I walked out, ignored their calls after me, and blocked every number that night. Some doors need to stay closed. 3 weeks later, the full extent of James' troubles emerged piece by piece. Over $90,000 in gambling debts and shady loans. The money he'd taken from me at 18? Lost in a combination of poker games and what he'd called a sure-thing investment scheme. My parents tried their usual minimizing tactics. Everyone makes mistakes, Mom pleaded during her last allowed call. He just needs one more chance. Then came the truth about their offer to repay double my money. It was a lie. They never had the funds. It was bait, designed to get me to either write another check or compromise my business relationships. 1 month later, the extended family mobilized like an army. Messages flooded in. How dare you abandon your brother, Aunt Sarah, who'd never offered James a dime. Success has made you heartless. Uncle Mike, comfortably retired and unwilling to help. Family stands together. Cousins who'd never stood for anything. Each one ready to judge. None willing to open their own wallets. Latest developments. Their latest tactic? Legal threats. My parents' attorney sent a letter claiming emotional damages and destruction of family bonds. My lawyer barely contained her laughter when she read it. They have no case, she assured me, but keep records of all communication. The situation has spiraled further. James is under federal investigation for fraud. Years of scams and schemes finally caught up with him. Meanwhile, my parents face eviction from their house, having refinanced it repeatedly to cover his debts. They're still trying to reach me through distant relatives, begging for help finding housing. The guilt creeps in during quiet moments. They're still my parents, after all. But then I remember the money they pressured me to give up, the rent demands the very next day, 5 years of silence until they needed something, the ambush dinner, the constant lies. No, I can't set myself on fire to keep them warm. Not anymore. Epilogue. The police investigation into James' fraud case is serious. Months of evidence gathering point toward likely jail time. The detectives interviewed me about his financial history, his schemes, his patterns of behavior. I told them everything. My parents are weeks away from losing their house. Years of refinancing to cover James' debts finally caught up with them. Through a cousin, they reached out again, asking me to use my business connections to help fight the eviction. Your realtor contacts could help them find somewhere affordable, the cousin suggested. Or maybe you could co-sign a lease. I blocked his number too. Despite everything, knowing they might end up homeless weighs on me. They're still my parents, the ones who taught me to read, who bandaged scraped knees, who drove me to art classes when I was young. But those parents are gone now, replaced by enablers who see me only as James' safety net. Late at night, I sometimes think about what Grandpa William told me on my 28th birthday. Don't let anyone derail your dreams. He'd seen it all along. The pattern, the manipulation, the way they'd sacrifice my future to enable James' destruction. My business continues to thrive. We're opening a third location next month. The corporate gift division has exploded, and our custom planner line has a waiting list. I should feel nothing but pride, but sometimes the emptiness creeps in. The cost of success, measured in lost family ties. But maybe that's the price of breaking toxic cycles. Sometimes moving forward means leaving people behind, even family. Especially when they refuse to change. I keep Grandpa William's investment contract framed in my office. Not just as a reminder of where I started, but of the choice he gave me. The choice to believe in myself when no one else would. That's the thing about toxic family dynamics. They don't change until someone refuses to play their assigned role. I'm done being the backup plan. Done being the safety net. Done setting myself on fire to keep others warm. I'm just me now. And finally, that's enough.